Have you ever seen someone in the army standing there, very nice, with his military uniform on, and on both of his shoulders, he has some visual thing, like the sort of things that go down saying he's got an award on his shoulders, if you know what I mean? Well, this checkmate is named after the shoulders of military uniforms. It's called the Epaulette checkmate. And in this position, this is a very basic example of it. Black to move goes queen to e6, checkmate. And you can see that the king here could be the person in the uniform. On either side of the king, his shoulders are taking away the escape squares, hence the Epaulette checkmate. Both rooks are next to the king, basically, just keeping it suffocated there on its square, its starting square. So an interesting checkmate, this one, Epaulette. And, you have to wonder where these names come from and who comes up with them. I couldn't find the information for this myself, but it's the concept I'm really concentrating on. So we're going to now move over to the world champion, who has managed to use this checkmate in a very beautiful game. So let's have a look at this game now. So we pick up this game with Magnus Carlsen having the white pieces and in the middle of a vicious attack against his grandmaster opponent from Holland. And Magnus Carlsen here, who has got an open h-file, a very active queen, and a bishop ready to explode that king away, should we say, plays bishop takes h6. And this removes another defender of the black king. Now, what can black do here? Well, black goes pawn takes bishop. And the point of Magnus's combination is a brilliant move. Rook takes h6 check, sacrificing a second piece. This is why the guy is world champion. Only one move, knight takes h6, but now the knight is no longer defending the bishop. And Magnus plays queen takes e7. So Magnus is using a combination of brute force here and creating threats at the same time. Force and threats, and it combined with very accurate calculation. The threat here is queen to h7, checkmate. So black has to put a piece on to f7. So he puts the knight onto f7. Magnus takes that knight off, and even though black is a rook up, look at the king. There's an open h-file towards the king. The queen can also come around and attack the king as well. So this rook doesn't matter so much here. Maybe if black's queen was on the other side of the board, so let's put that queen all the way on g6, he'd be able to defend here. But that is not the case. And again, these little, should we say, instruments of attack should be warning bells for you when you're looking for these combinations. Look at your opponent's pieces, look at ways to rip open your opponent's king, and make sure your calculation is good. Exactly what Magnus does here. Black has to stop queen to f6 check, so he goes king to g7. And now Magnus really needs to get his rook into the attack. He's not going to checkmate just with the queen. So he does a typical technique, rook d3, the rook swinger. The rook comes around the angles. Black tries to give his king a bit of protection with rook d6, trying to put the rook in front of the king and setting a bit of a nasty trap there. What would happen if Magnus played queen takes d6? Well, queen to e1, and it would be Magnus who gets checkmated. But instead, he looks for the most aggressive moves, which are checks. Rook to g3 check. Now, if the king moves to the h-file, Magnus will put his queen on h4 at the right moment, delivering checkmate. So he has to play rook to g6. And here Magnus continues with queen to e5 check, and he's calculated extremely well here. What can black do here? Well, black can either take the pawn on f7 or move the king to the h-file. The problem black is, if he ever moves to the h-file, he's going to be setting himself up for a check along that file. For example, king to h7, and now the most accurate way to win is queen to h5 check, threatening to capture the rook, forcing rook to f6, and now you just keep looking at the most forcing moves. This is what you need to do when you build up your combinational vision. Look for the checks. Queen f5 check, king h8. Only one good check. Queen e5 check. And now it's checkmate. Queen to g7, checkmate. So a very complicated combination here. But we're going to see how it arrives at our checkmate. After king takes f7, Magnus now played queen to f5 check. and he's trying to win the rook on g6. Only one way to stop that, rook to f6, and what can Magnus now play? Can you see the move? Queen to d7, and this is an example of the Epaulette checkmate. In this position, the black king, should we say the soldier, has his he has his soldiers here, meaning he can't escape. He's trapped parallel by these two pieces, and a very nice version of this checkmate, because in actual fact, in this version, the king is not on the back rank, but it's trapped by the opposing rook. So another example of this pattern in action. And let's just have a look at one more case of this before we move on to another video. Our last example of this checkmate, again, taken from a very high class, high rated encounter. With the white pieces, you've got Luke van Wely, King Luke, as also known, who's the strongest player in Holland, has been for a number of times, well, until Giri came along, but he's a veteran of the chessboard. With the black pieces, one of the most imaginative players of all time, Alexander Morozevich. In this position, Luke blunders with rook to f1. And you can see here this pattern. And this is, again, what you've got to start to realize in order to be able to use these techniques in your games. Here, the king is stuck on this square because it has a rook on either side of it. And this is the thing where your alarming bell should be going, I can see my opponent's king is stuck like that. So how do I get a piece into the right square, delivering checkmate? And this is really what these sort of checkmate patterns are all about. It's nice knowing the names, but the names are not important. Who cares what they're called? It's more important to understand the piece arrangements, to understand the patterns. When you see these patterns coming together on the board, get those alarm bells ringing. Can you take advantage of these patterns? Can you force your way through? And this is a basic example of that. It's black to play and win. Can you see the killer technique here, the killer combination? Pause now if you need to. Rook to g8 check, a lovely move. And in this position, white resigned. The point is, he's got to take that rook, and now queen to g7 is checkmate. Another lovely example of this checkmate. There's plenty more videos to come. I'll see you soon for another video.